See, learning SAVI is really a shortcut to thinking. You don't really have to think once you've learnt the categories. You can just automatically decide which category your verbal behavior belongs in, and then you can change it. See? But I'm here to try to get you to think about it. Okay, so what we're talking about is the contradiction here. If we come over to here, what is the contradiction? What's happening in these categories? You're actually not coming out with facts. Do you see? You're coming out with, again, a lovely social activity. There's nothing more fun than gossip. You know, what on earth would we do without gossip? Well, we'd start to live in an SCT community, which is rather boring without gossip, but it is one of the requirements. Okay, but gossip's fun, isn't it? Okay, and what happens to the information in gossip? Distorted. Yes, it has to be distorted, otherwise it's no fun. Okay, and the same with mind reading. Mind reading, it's all based on projection. In SCT, when we undo mind reading, we get people to learn how to discriminate between a projection and a perception. This is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm thinking. Does it match when I check it out with you? Yes. I've learned something about my perception being accurate. No. I'm in danger of learning something about my projection. Okay? And it's difficult because if the way you see things are dissonant from the way you feel your interpretation of them, it's uncomfortable. Anybody who's read Festinger, who has done a lot of studies of what happens when the way someone sees the world and they suddenly see the world quite differently, what happens is enormous dissonance. It's also very important in groups because groups have the power of totally mind-fucking someone. See? And there's an experiment that Festinger did where that the whole group knows that they're going to distort reality. So what Festinger did was he drew a large line called A and a short line called B, and he asked the group members which was the longest line. And they all said B, which was the shorter line. And by the time they came to the poor person who wasn't in the know, they either said B's the shorter line, or they had a crisis because they said it was the longer line. Well, I was teaching that in a class at university, and I was sort of kidding with the class about that. And so I was saying, so which is the longer line and which is the shorter line? And the class were all saying B's the longer line. And then one of the class members said, oh, well, I thought A was the longer line, but then I'm pregnant. Which is the rationalization for not going along with the crowd. So if you see in subgrouping, you can't set that pattern up. Somebody comes late to your group, and you say, well, you're not the only person who was late. You've got a subgroup of other people who came in after the boundary. Big difference from letting them come in late and sweat it. Do you see? So in subgrouping, you can't do the sort of thing that happens to all of us all the time, in which there's a strong opinion, one has a difference, and then what does one do with that difference? Yeah, you do sweat it, right. Or if you're lucky, you can bring it in. So here you've got the absence of reality testing, which means the absence of fact. So our original category system was personal and factual, and then there were, how do you know, according to Shannon and Weaver, how do you know when information has got across? Well, one of the things that we decided was that you know if information got across if somebody reflects it. So if I ask a question and you answer it, there's information that we got the communication across, do you see? So look, you can now start going all over the board, you see. You ask a question and somebody answers it. There's a demonstration that this has crossed the boundary. You ask a question, and somebody says, oh, that was an important question, wasn't it? There's no information that went across the boundary. Okay? So the criteria began to be that if you're going to cross the boundary from fairly neutral behavior to information that has evidence, it depends on the sequence pair. It depends on what comes next. So, all the way down here, not counting this one, all the way down here, you've got evidence that information has crossed the boundary. You can also start to notice what happens in a group when there is a defense against information crossing the boundary. Now, I've got something that was an absolute delight to me. I took a whole, I SAVI'd a whole hour and a half of a therapy group that I judged was dysfunctional. And what happened, by and large, was that the information in the therapy group was skewed to that. So it would come in neutral and it would tend to go up. So then I thought, well, that's interesting. I wonder whether coding so much information meant that the whole thing washed out. So I then divided the script into 4, and I took the 10 minutes right in the middle of each one of those quarters. And I coded those. They reflected the group as a whole. So I thought, well, that's really interesting. There's some evidence here that the same thing went on throughout the group. So then I thought, well, I wonder what happens. I wonder how that got made up, whether it was the same people that contributed and didn't do it. And then I did the coding of the different people, and different people had different inputs. But what happened was the group washed them out. And at one time when the group started to work down here, the therapist took them up. It was really interesting. So I want to show you something. Another way of coding SAVI is like a musical script. Might as well use Anita's red, yellow, and green. Okay? All right, so here you have the top line, here you have the middle line, and here you have the bottom line. Here there's evidence that there's been information transferred. Here there's no evidence of information transfer, and here you see evidence that not only is it not going to be transferred, but it's going to make noise in the system. So do you see that if the communication pattern goes like that, it's going to be very different from communication patterns going like that. And if you are down here and you suddenly go up there, so that every time you go down here, you go back up there, you know that the probability that problems can get solved, that conflicts can get solved in the group, is very low. So as you're listening, if ever you're bored at a meeting, if you follow the communication pattern, you can understand why you're bored. Okay? Because the information keeps going up into the I'm not going to deal with reality set. So it's like, let's just say it's a dialogue between you and me. Okay? So this is you, and this is me. And this is you, and this is me. And this is you. Well, by now you're fed up with me taking it down, so you're reacting, thank you very much. You're saying, I'm not having a very good time here. And I say, neutrally, you're saying you're not having a very good time. No, sorry. Why are you not having a very good time here?
I'm having a good time, but I'm thinking about it.
There you go. You're up on a yes spot. And then I say, is there something that I'm doing that making it hard for us to have this conversation?
Isn't there another way you could ask me that question?
There we go. Up you go. Jolly good. Not going to forgive me too soon, are you? So do you see? So you can track a conversation not by your, and this is very hard for a psychoanalyst, not by motive, not by psychodynamics, but by the simple communication categories.